The steak was perfect, 12-ounce ribeye seared medium rare, resting in a pool of garlic butter and fresh thyme. Clarence had outdone himself via aroma enough to make a grown man forget his troubles. Bumpy Johnson cut into it, raised the first bite to his lips, chewed, and then his jaw stopped. Not because of the taste. The taste was immaculate. It was the texture, something between his teeth. That had no business being there, like chewing silk and finding sand. Years in federal prisons had taught Bumpy things that no man should have to learn. Inmates paid guards to sprinkle glass into a rival's mashed potatoes. You learned to trust your tongue more than your eyes. You learned, or you bled out from the inside, wondering why your stomach was on fire. Bumpy didn't spit it out, didn't let a single muscle in his face reveal what his mouth had just discovered. He reached for his wine glass, took a slow sip, swished it, gently, washing the glass fragments to the front of his mouth. Then he raised his napkin, dabbed his lips like a gentleman, and deposited the evidence into the white cloth. He cut another piece of saint, eek, raised it toward his mouth, touched it to his lips, chewed nothing but air, while his hand slid the meat into the napkin on his lap. Across the private dining room of the Red Rooster supper seat, loop, someone was watching, someone who was waiting for Bumpy Johnson to swallow enough glass to shred his insides into ribbons. Bumpy didn't know who, not yet, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. By the next day, he would find out. Then he walked out of the Red Rooster with a napkin full of poisoned meat, a calm expression, and a clock ticking in his head. The hunt had begun. Bumpy's Cadillac pulled up to the brownstone. His driver, a young man named Curtis, opened the rear door and noticed immediately that something was wrong. Bumpy moved differently, same calm exterior, or same measured steps, but underneath, a tension that Curtis had only seen once before, the night before a war erupted years prior. "Get Juno," Bumpy said quietly, and Nat Pettigrew, "have them here within the hour. Everything all right, Mr. Johnson." Bumpy paused at the door, turned. The street light caught his eyes, and Curtis felt his spine stiffen. "Someone tried to kill me tonight. At the Red Rooster in front of the whole damn dining room." Bumpy's voice was calm, too calm. "By sunrise. I want to know who, why, and where they're hiding." "Clear." Curtis nodded. He was in his car and driving before Bumpy's front door closed. Inside, Mame was reading in the parlor. She looked up, saw her husband's face, and set her book aside. "Ellsworth, what happened?" Bumpy placed the sty net napkin on the coffee table, unfolded it carefully. The half-out chewed pieces of steak sat in the center, glistening with saliva and glass. "Ground glass," he said. "In my ribeye." Ma's hand went to H. "A throat. Lord have mercy. Who? That's what I need to find out." Bumpy sat down heavily, the first sign of fatigue he'd allowed himself. Could have been anyone in that kitchen, 12 staff members, any of them could have touched that plate. "But you suspect someone." Bumpy was silent for a moment. His eyes drifted to the napkin, to the evidence of his near death. Clarence prepared it him. "LF, brought it out personally. Watch me eat." He exhaled slowly. 6 years, ma'am, every Thursday. I trusted that man with my life, and he tried to take it. Maybe, or maybe someone used high. Got to someone else in that kitchen. Bumpy shook his head. "That's what I need to know. The who is easy, the why, that's what matters." By midnight, Bumpy's parlor had become a Washington. Our room, Juno Brown arrived first, years old, built like a boxer who never stopped training. Eyes that had seen enough violence to fill 3 lifetimes. He'd been with Bumpy since the old day. Had killed for him, bled for him, nearly died for him twice. Nat Pettigrew came later. Thin, quiet, forgettable, which made him perfect for his job. Nat ran the streets, nothing hop. Penned in those blocks without his knowledge. He was Bumpy's eyes and ears, the human network that made Harlem readable. Bumpy laid out the situation, the steak, the glass, the survival. I need to know everyone who was in that kitchen tonight. He said, every cook, every dishwasher, every busboy who walked through those doors. I need to know who's been talking to outsiders, who's got money problems, who's got grudges. Juno cracked his knuckles. You want me to bring them in? Not yet. First we watch, first we listen. Bumpy turns to Nat, the red rooster, who owns it really. Earl Washington on paper, but you know he's got Italian money behind him, silent partners downtown. Coslow's people arranged the liquor license years back. Coslow, Bumpy let the name sit in the air. Fr. On Coslow had been circling Harlem for years, looking for entry points into the numbers game. Any movement from his people recently? Anything unusual? Nat hesitated. There's a name I've been here. Ring, Vincent Tagliaferro. They call him Vinny. Eyes. He's been spotted uptown more than usual. Places he's got no business being. Doing what? Talking, buying drinks, making friends. Nat paused. Ed, building something. Bumpy nodded slowly. The picture was forming, still blurry at the edges, but taking shape. Start with the kitchen staff. I want names, addresses, families, debts. Everything by morning. Nat returned to the brownstone with a folder full of handwritten notes, 12 names, 12 lives, 12 potential killers. Most were clean. No debts, no connections, no reasons to want. Bumpy dead. Small people living small lives. Grateful for steady work in a Harlem kitchen, but 3 names had asterisks. Marcus Bell, dishwasher, owed money to a loan shark. Could have been. Pressured. Doime Franklin, prep cook. Had a brother doing time. Could have been leveraged. And Clarence Mosley, head chef. 6 years of impeccable service. No debts, no vices, no obvious pressure points, but a dead brother. Tell me about this, Bumpy said, pointing to the note next to Clarence's name. Nat shifted uncomfortably. His younger brother, Delray Mosley, died years back, beaten in an alley behind a grocery store. By who? Nat didn't answer immediately. His silence said everything. By who? Nat, Juno's boys. They were looking for a runner who'd stole. And from one of our counting houses. Delray matched the description. Wrong place, wrong time. Nat exhaled. They realized the mistake too late. Left him. He died days later at Harlem Hospital. The room wee. Antique quiet. Bumpy stared at the wall, his jaw tight. I never knew about this. It was handled. Or it was supposed to be. Juno's men paid for the funeral. The family was told it was random viol. Ants, but Clarence knew if he did his own digging. Yeah, he would have found out. Nat closed the folder. 8 years. Bumpy, that's a long time to carry hate. Bumpy stood, walked to the window. Look, Diad at Harlem, waking up beneath a gray sky. 8 years, every Thursday, every perfect meal. Clarence hadn't been cooking for Bumpy. He'd been sharpening himself, waiting for the moment way. And patience and opportunity align. And Bumpy had never seen it coming because he hadn't known, hadn't bothered to know. Delray Mosley was just another body in the machinery of an empire, collateral damage in a war that Bumpy was. Always winning until now. Find Vinny Eyes, Bumpy said quietly. Don't touch him, just find him. I want to know exactly how he wound CL. Arns up and pointed him at me, the trail to Vinny Eyes. Led through a social club, a barber shop that served as a message drop, and finally to a back booth at an Italian restaurant in East Harlem, where the man himself sat eating linguine like he didn't have a care in the world. Nat's people watched, reported, built the picture. Weeks earlier, Vinny had approached Clarence outside a church Sunday. Why, after service, the conversation lasted minutes. Clarence had walked away angry, but Vinny came back 3 more times over the following weeks, each conversation longer than the last. Then Beth, or the steak. Clarence had met Vinny at a diner in the Bronx, neutral ground, no witnesses who mattered. Whatever happened in that diner sealed the deal. Vinny had found Clarence's wound, years old, but still bleeding, and had torn it wide open. The Italians hadn't paid Clarence. They hadn't needed to. They'd simply offer him what no amount of money could buy, the opportunity to kill. The man responsible for his brother's death, revenge. The most dangerous courtesy in the world. Bumpy found Juno in the basement of the brownstone cleaning a pistol that hadn't been fired in months. We need to talk about Delroy Mosley. Juno's hand stopped moving. He didn't look up. That was a long time ago. Bumpy, not long enough, apparently. Bumpy sat across from him. Tell him. What happened? The real version. Juno set the pistol down. His face was heavy with something that might have been regret. Samuel Pitt stole money from the counting house. I sent 2 of my boys too. Collect. They grabbed a kid matching the description. Beat him in the alley until he talked. Juno paused. Except he didn't talk because he didn't know anything, because he wasn't Pitt's. And by the tea. They figured out the mistake. The kid was barely breathing. They panicked, left him. I found out the next morning when the body turned up at Harlem Hospital. Juno finally met Bumpy's eyes. I handled it quietly, paid for the burial, made sure the family was taken care of, kept it out of the papers. But you never told me. You were away that month. Federal court. By the tea. You got back. It was over. I didn't see the point in dragging it up. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. The weight of the silence pressed down on both of them. His brother has been cooking my food for 6 years. Juno, waiting for the chance to kill me. And I never knew why, because you never told me. I know. An innocent kid died because of our operation, and I never knew. I know. Juno's voice cracked slightly, and I've lived with that for years. Same as Clarence, I suppose, just on the other side. Bumpy stood. His face was unreadable. Clarence is running. He knows the glass didn't work. By now, he's figured out I survived, and he's trying to disappear before I find him. Bumpy moved toward the stairs. We find him. Bring him to the Red Rooster, the kitchen, and then Bumpy paused at the bottom step when he spoke. His voice was heavy with something that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite sorrow. Then I do what I have to do. Same as always. They found Claire. Ence, he was in a rooming house, packing a single suitcase, with hands that trembled. When Juno's men kicked down the door, Clarence didn't run, didn't fight. He looked up at them with eyes that had already accepted what was coming. Take you long enough, he said. They brought him to the Red Rooster after closing through the back door into the kitchen, where he had spent years preparing meals and dreaming of murder. 12 staff members stood along the walls, summoned by Bumpy's order. Witnesses Tommy Perkins, the sous chef, Doime Franklin, Marcus Bell, the dishwashers, the prep cooks, T.H. E-bus boys, everyone who had worked alongside Clarence, never knowing what burned inside him. Bumpy entered last. He walked slowly, deliberately, his footsteps echoing on the tile floor. He stopped a short distance from Clarence, who stood in the center of the kitchen, wristbound in front of him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. You should be dead, Clarence finally said. His voice was flat, empty. I put enough glass in that steak to shred your stomach into ribbons. I know. Bumpy's voice was calm. Prison taught me things. How to taste what doesn't belong. How to swallow it. How swallowing. He paused. You've been cooking for me for years, Clarence. But this meal, this one you made for yourself, Clarence laughed bitterly. You don't even remember him, do you? Delroy, my brother, young, beaten to death in an alley by your men, because he was wearing the wrong coat. I remember now. Now, Clarence spat the word. Years later, after I had to bury him in a pine box, Becca, used we couldn't afford anything else, after your man, Juno, sent money like that was supposed to make it right. Tears welled in his eyes, but his voice stayed hard. You took everything from me. Everything. Bumpy stood motionless. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerators. I didn't order what happened to your brother. I didn't know about it until yesterday. Bumpy's voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority, but he died because of my operation, my people, my war. He paused. That's not an excuse. That's a confession. Clarence blinked. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't. This, your brother was innocent. He shouldn't have died, and you shouldn't have had to carry that weight alone for years. Bumpy took a step closer. But you tried to kill me, Clarence, in my city at my table in front of everyone who matters. And you would have done the same if someone murdered your family. Maybe. Bumpy nodded slowly. Maybe I would have, but I would have done it with my own hands, looking the man in his eyes, not hiding poison in his food like a coward. Clarence flinched. The word landed harder than any fist could have. Bumpy turned to Juno. Open the FR. Easer, the walk-in freezer door was heavy steel, designed to keep meat far below zero. When Juno pulled it open, a cloud of frozen air rolled out like a ghost. Clarence's face went pale. Bumpy, wait. You spent years in this kitchen, made it your home, turned it into a weapon. Bumpy gestured toward the freezer. Now it becomes your lesson. Juno's men grabbed Clarence's arms. He struggled, but he was a chef, not a fighter. They dragged him toward the freezer door while the kitchen staff watched in frozen silence. Bumpy, please. Clarence was screaming now, all composure. Gone. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I know. Bumpy's voice cut through the panic like a blade. But everyone else needs to see this. They need to understand. What happens when you come for the king and miss? Clarence was shoved inside. The cold hit him immediately. A wall of frozen air that stole the breath from his lungs. He turned, eyes wide, as Juno began to swing the door closed. 8 hours. Bumpy said, you'll survive. Barely, but you'll never forget. The door sealed with a heavy thud. Clarence's muffled screams echoed through the steel for almost an hour before they finally faded into silence. When the freezer door opened, Clarence was curled in the corner, barely conscious. His lips were blue. His fingers, the fingers the tea had created art on a plate for decades, were black with frostbite. 3 on his left hand, 2 on his right. Juno's men pulled him out, wrapped him in blankets, called a doctor who asked no questions. Clarence would live, but he would never cook again. Bumpy stood over him as the doctor worked, studying the man who had tried to kill him. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, no triumph, only a weariness that went bone deep. You're leaving New York, Bumpy said quietly. Tonight. You don't come back ever. If I see your face north of Philadelphia, you not in a freezer, in the ground. Clarence couldn't speak. His teeth were chattering too violently. But before you go, Bumpy reached into his coat and produced an envelope, set it on Clarence's chest. There's enough in there for a fresh start. Somewhere warm. You'll need it. Clarence's eyes widened. Confusion cut through the cold. I'm not doing this for you, Bumpy continued. I'm doing it for Delroy because I can't bring him back. Can't undo what my people did. He paused. But I can make sure his brother doesn't die in an alley, too. He turned and walked toward the door. Stopped at the threshold. One more thing. Your brother's grave. The pine box. Bumpy's voice was quiet, almost gentle. By the end of the month, there'll be a proper headstone. Marble. His name, his dates, and 2 words. Remember always. He left without waiting for a response. Clarence Mosley left New York on a Greyhound bus days later, his hands wrapped in bandages. His career day. Troyed, his revenge of failure. He settled in Miami, where the warmth helped with the phantom pain in his missing fingers. Found work as a dishwasher, the only kitchen job he could still perform. Never cooked again. Some nights when the restaurant closed and he was alone with the steam and the silence, He would look at his hands and remember the freezer, the cold, the man who had punished him, and then paid for his brother's headstone in the same breath. He never understood Bumpy Johnson. Never made peace with what had happened to Delroy, to himself, to the life he'd thrown away on revenge. But he never went back to New York either. Back in Harlem, the story spread like frost across a window. The chef who tried to kill Bumpy Johnson, the glass in the steak, the night in the freezer. By the end of the week, every kitchen in the borough knew the details. The message was clear. You could hate Bumpy Johnson, you could dream about killing him, but if you tried and failed, you'd spend the rest of your life wearing the proof of your failure. Vinny Eyes received a package at his social club in East Harlem. Inside was a steak knife frozen solid and a note in Bumpy's handwriting. The kitchen is closed. Stay out of Harlem. Frank Coslow's people never tried to recruit from Bumpy's territory again. And on a cold morning, a marble headstone was installed at the cemetery. Simple, elegant, permanent. Delroy Mosley, remembered always. Bumpy visited once alone on a day when no one would notice. He stood at the grave for minutes without speaking. Then he placed a single white rose on the fresh-turned earth and walked away. Revenge doesn't balance scales. It just adds weight to both sides. But sometimes, just sometimes, you can take a little weight off. Look, if the story hit different, you already know what to do. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications because next week, we're going deep on the time Bumpy Johnson walked into a room with 15 guns pointed at his head and walked out with an apology and a business deal. 15 guns, 1 Bumpy, 0 bullets fired. You're not going to want to miss that. 1. Drop a comment below. Was Bumpy right to spare Clarence, or should the freezer door have stayed closed forever? I read every single one. Let me know what you think. And remember, in Harlem, he walls had ears, the kitchens had secrets, and Bumpy Johnson always found out the truth, one way or another.